Hello, I'm Courtney Lias and I'm with the FDA in our Office of Vitro Diagnostic Devices, and we regulate devices for diabetes products. And though you may have heard someone from our group, me or someone else from our group, talk before about the types of things we do to get products to the market, you haven't really heard us talk yet much about products that are, and what happens from FDA's point of view, and how we help the safety and effectiveness of products once they are on the market. How do we protect public health once the diabetes devices are out there? And so I gave a similar presentation at ATTD this year, and Amy asked if perhaps I might give a similar presentation to this group who may not necessarily know about some of the post-market aspects of FDA regulation. So here at FDA, certainly most of the time people in the public, what do they think we do? They think we regulate drugs or maybe food. But I'm from the device group. We regulate all medical products like devices and vaccines and even veterinary medicine, etc. But here in the device group, we regulate, medical devices. And people from the medical device industry, they may think that we put up roadblocks. I hope not. But, certainly some people may think that. What does the diabetes community think we do? Perhaps they think that we look at data, that we scrutinize the information, that we make sure it's perfect. But what do we think we do? We think that we act as referees. We try to take the balance between, the need for products to be on the market with the information that needs to be available to make sure that they're used effectively. So we try to strike that balance between the benefits and risks of the product to try to make sure that products are out there that can help patients and that the risks are adequately mitigated. So many of you are very familiar with our pre-market review paradigm, that a product that needs to go on the market typically has to go through FDA to get on that market, that we look at the data behind that product, that we look at what they say they're doing, and does it really work? As I mentioned before, we don't require perfection, and this is especially true in the diabetes area, where there may be inherent risks to having diabetes that we have to recognize. If somebody is already at risk, then a product that adds a little bit of risk but also adds benefit may be a zero-sum game, or may actually provide additional benefit to that patient than their status quo. And so we may approve that product because it will help some people, or it will help many people, despite the fact that it also may put them at risk. I think insulin pumps are a good thing here because they certainly help very many people, but they also provide some different types of risks than a person not using a pump may face. But there's some more things that we do. Once a product does reach the market and is used by patients, FDA's work doesn't stop. There are still additional FDA regulatory activities that go into making sure that the products you use every day are safe. And so today I'm going to talk to you a lot about sort of the post-market aspect. What are the requirements when a manufacturer has a marketed device, and how do they help keep patients safe? And why do we have these requirements? So, one of the things that we add as value when we're regulating products is accountability. So it means that someone is responsible for making sure all the aspects of that product development, manufacture, and distribution are taken care of. There isn't just some sort of nebulous entity, so that if a healthcare provider or a patient has an issue, they know that there's someone that they can call and who has the responsibility of addressing their issue. We regulate the manufacturing and design of products, meaning that companies need to have a systematic approach to making sure that the products that they make are of high quality. This includes things like design control and risk assessment, complaint handling, and corrective and preventive actions when problems are identified. And I'll go a little bit more into those in a minute. We also do enforcement and compliance. Occasionally there are companies that maybe aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And FDA is there as an independent check to make sure that they are held accountable or that they do make corrections that are necessary to keep patients safe. This also includes looking at their adverse event reporting, doing recalls, and then, in really bad situations, sending warning letters, doing seizures or injunctions, or even civil money penalties. And then a lot of the times, we make sure that, devices, they all have risks, none are perfect. At least they should have instructions that let people know, hey, is how you should use this product safely. Here are some limitations of this product, and here are some things you should consider when using it. So one of the things we do is called design control. Design control is a requirement by which the manufacturer needs to do specific really thoughtful design of their products. And that means they should set out to say, what am I trying to make how should I make it, and how well should it work? And so they do what's called, defining functional requirements. This device should work this well. And then they write that down and they make sure it's documented. And then they go and they make the device, they do validation, and then they check, did I make it well enough? And if they didn't make it well enough, they either have to assess whether or not they have to revise those specifications or go back and fix something until their device works as well as it needs to work. For example, if you're making a pump and you say it needs to be able to consistently deliver this flow rate, and they make the pump and then it doesn't do that, they have to go back and fix it. They have to assure that there are specifications for their product by which they need to manufacture it, so that each device or each lot of product actually meets the specifications that they set forth. And then they need to make sure when they change the device that they do that thoughtfully and with an assessment of how it might affect the product. We also do help companies with recalls. Most recalls in the United States are voluntary recalls. They're initiated by the company. And this is what happens when there's something that goes wrong with the device, when there is a correction that needs to happen. And a recall is when, say, a company determines that they need to fix something about their product that they didn't realize before. And when they do that, they need to let people know about it. So most of the time, recalls are meant to correct a product. They may or may not include market removal. But the point is to inform users of a problem with the device, inform them of what steps to take to prevent the problem, and it rarely includes an actual market withdrawal. I think, diabetes device users out in the audience, you're probably pretty familiar with recalls. Many times, what may happen is a manufacturer who is performing a recall may tell you about the recall and tell you about steps to take. For example, look at your product and make sure you don't have this defect. And if you do have this defect, return it for a new product. Or look at your product and make sure that you take these steps in order to do this certain process, or this other thing will result. And so they're really meant to be a way to inform everyone using it, healthcare providers, patients, etc., of the things that need to be corrected. We also have companies are required to do complaint handling and MDR reporting. They must maintain complaint files. They must investigate those complaints and determine whether or not they are things that need to be reported as adverse events, including injuries, deaths, and malfunctions. We also require that they do corrective and preventive actions. That is, when there is a problem, they need to identify what the issue is and prevent it from occurring in the future. So I want to go through an example that's going to try to help illustrate some of these points. And so the example that I have here is that perhaps that there is a product that the company needed to make a software update to. They needed to improve the time of day tracking, for example, for tracking insulin dosing or glucose values. So they made the software modification and they put it out. And now I have a tale of two companies. One is a company owned by Negligent Nick. He developed this software fix to improve time of day tracking, and he validated his fix on the app that goes with his device. Another company, Quality Quinton, had the same fix, but in their case, they used design control to create new time specifications. They made the fix, then they checked all of those design specifications to validate they're still met. So they not only checked the new specifications they made, but they went back and made sure that all of the other specifications for the device are still met when they made that change. Now, what happened in these two scenarios? In the scenario for Negligent Nick, he implemented the fix on the new app and sent out the software patch to everyone who was using it. However, it turned out the software patch wasn't functional on the people who already had the app. It worked on the new apps that he was making in his house, but it did not work as a patch to update users. And the time zones on those devices did not update correctly. So this adversely affected insulin on board calculations for this product. Now, what did Quality Quinton do? He validated that the testing, he did the validation testing for all of his specifications. When he did that, he realized by testing not only products that he was making in-house, but by testing the patch that he was putting out, that the new software fix would not work in the app. And so he went back to the design change to create a fix for this problem that did not, that actually did work on the app. So the same example, but now we're going to CAPA, which complaint handling and adverse event reporting. So Negligent Nick, when he put out this patch and this insulin on board issue occurred, users started reporting injuries to him of varying severity. Some of them were annoyances to them, and some of them were actually injuries. However, Negligent Nick did not have a process for handling complaints. He did not have a process for reporting MDRs or determining whether something rose to the level of being an adverse event. Whereas quality quintin, if his design control in the first place didn't prevent it, when users report injuries, he has a process in place to track complaints, and he reported MDRs to the agency. Now, what does this accomplish? In the case of negligent Nick, there is no transparency because he did not report any adverse events. In addition, he has no real grasp of the scope of the problem. Because he's not tracking the complaints, he doesn't really have an idea of how many he's getting and whether there are any trends. Now, Quintin, on the other hand, is tracking complaints, and so that was how he was able to understand that there was a real big issue with this problem. And when he submits MDRs for these injuries, these MDRs are posted publicly so that there's a lot of transparency around the problems that they're seeing with this device and for patients and healthcare providers. So in the same issue, when you get into the recall or corrective action area, negligent Nick finally realized there was a problem. He took 4 weeks to develop the software fix, but he didn't notify anyone. So while he was doing the software fix, nobody knew about it. But whereas quality quintin, if his design control didn't prevent this problem in the first place, once he realized there was a problem, he immediately performed a voluntary recall and notified all affected users of the issues and the steps they need to take to prevent the problem while he's doing the fix, because it's still going to take him 4 weeks. He just is going to let everybody know, hey, by the way, there's this problem. If you do these 3 things, you're going to end up with an insulin on board problem. So correct it in this manner temporarily until we get you a fix. Negligent Nick didn't do that, and so for weeks, users weren't aware of the problem, and he got additional injuries and complaints as a result. Whereas Quintin made the issue transparent to all his users and was able to prevent further injury by making these communications while he was developing this fix. And then CAPA, which is corrective and preventive action for the same problem. Negligent Nick's, he refixed the software patch. Quintin also, he investigated the root cause of the problem when he made the software fix. So when negligent Nick went to change it, he still didn't know why the problem was caused in the first place within his procedures. He didn't know what his software development process, what went wrong in his software development process. So that the next time he went to do an update or make a change to his device, a similar problem may occur. Whereas quality quintin understood, hey, what went wrong? Oh, you know what we didn't do? We didn't check these 3 things, in our procedure. So they added safeguards to their procedure to try to prevent this type of software bug from occurring in the future. Another example of this sort of thing might be, and is actually based on a real thing, is say you had a CGM that had a sensor needle packs that were supposed to be sterile. A company places these packs that are sterilized on a shelf right next to a shelf that looks exactly the same with the unsterile packs. And so some got mixed up and the non-sterile product was shipped. In the case of quality quintin, his good manufacturing practice requirements would require adequate procedures to prevent that mix-up in the first place. So it would never be a good idea to put the sterile and unsterile products that look the same right next to each other. But if it did happen, quality quintin has some complaint handling in place to identify the problem. So he starts to get complaints of infections, he starts to see increased reports, and he realizes there's an issue to initiate investigation. He performs a recall of all the sensor lots and lets people know, these are the lots that may have been effective, you shouldn't use these lots, we're going to ship you new ones. And then he does CAPA to find out, why did this happen? Oh, our shelves were next to each other. And then he moves the shelves to different rooms, for example, to prevent this similar problem to happening in the future. He also does an assessment of similar processes in his manufacturing that might also benefit from this type of correction. Negligent Nick, on the other hand, doesn't have any adequate procedures, and his risk of errors increases because he doesn't think about these things as part of his manufacturing. Since he doesn't have proper complaint tracking, safety signals are going undetected while this is happening. Users aren't notified, and when he does spot fixes, he doesn't really assess whether or not there are other ways that he can help users prevent this type of problem and prevent injuries. So in summary, FDA post-market requirements are necessary to maintain the safety and effectiveness of medical devices. And these things that manufacturers of medical devices do in the post-market phase are really, really critical. to ensure that the products that are being shipped are the same as the ones you want. For example, if you used glucose meter test strips must be manufactured under good manufacturing practices, which include requirements for lot release criteria and procedures that will release test strips that work the same across lots. Without these types of FDA requirements, you may get one lot of test strips that work one way and a different lot of test strips that work completely differently. And this would not allow for users to be able to predict how these products will work for them each day. That type of thing can lead to injuries. The quality system helps to keep people safe. One thing I want to emphasize is that recalls are often looked at as negative, maybe by patients, maybe by healthcare providers, and sometimes by the industry. But I want to tell you that a recall is not itself a bad thing. A recall is part of the expected life cycle of a product. People are manufacturing these things, people are designing these things, and nobody is perfect, and so mistakes will happen, especially when they include software, because the unanticipated software features will come up, and often those will prompt a recall. So when a company identifies an issue and they do a recall, a prompt recall after identifying a problem is not an issue with the company. It's a sign of a good quality system, and you should feel a high level of confidence in companies who appear to have promptly recalled their products. When you open a corrective and preventive action plan, a CAPA, it's very healthy within a company to open a CAPA, investigate issues, mitigate them, make sure that your fixes are effective, and then close them out. That's the sign of a healthy quality system. Tracking complaints and reporting adverse events is also a sign of a healthy quality system. When we see diabetes companies who have 0 adverse event reports, we actually see that as a signal of an unhealthy quality system, and often will prompt us to go and inspect them. Unfortunately, diabetes products will always have injuries, reportable injuries associated with them because of the nature of the disease. So when we see a company not reporting, we suspect that maybe they don't have good systems in place. The problems come when firms avoid taking actions that they need to take in the post-market phase. When they do late recalls, they may expose people to problems for years and years and years. And these things could be avoidable simply by telling people about the problem and how to temporarily fix it while they're addressing it. Poor CAPA procedures let known problems persist throughout their manufacturing and distribution chains. And when companies don't report, it keeps patients and healthcare providers in the dark. We do have some information on our website. I know a lot of the people who attend this conference are new to the manufacturing community. And so FDA's website, we have a section called Device Advice, and it has comprehensive regulatory assistance. I've included a link here, but you can also Google Device Advice to find that information. So with this, I'll stop, and I really look forward to questions and answers about how FDA's post-market activities can help patients stay safe. Thank you very much.